welcome back to On the Road with Vincent. Now, today's episode is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be, split into a couple parts here. All one episode, or all one part, I should say. But I filmed a little bit of this episode back in the summer with Raven, so if you should notice that halfway through, all my facial hair disappears, I'm going to change of clothes. That's why. But with me today, have a special guest, Midnite Massacre drummer, D. Kendrixx.
What's up, guys? Glad to be on the road with Vincent, finally.
Yeah, we've been planning this episode for a while because this is a place that's kind of has a history for the both of us together. And this episode is going to be around creepy local cemeteries. So we're going to what is called the Hatcher Cemetery, just right up the road from where me and Dee both grew up. Now, what would you like to say about this place, Dee?
I remember coming up here with some friends a while back, but for him and I, it's been over 10 years, or right at 10 years, and it was kind of that experience, like down below the hill, like it was very nice and sunny and all that good stuff, and then we get up there and the wind starts blowing really hard, like the trees about nearly touching the ground and the leaves going up in the air, and it's kind of definitely something I've never really been to versus other cemeteries, but this thing definitely has a little bit of I don't know really how to word it, but an atmosphere to it.
Let's just put it this way: of all the places we have been with On the Road with Vincent, this is the one place I am honestly kind of dreading to go to. I really don't want to do this, but stick around and we'll see you here in a second. So, as you can see, we are literally right on the Carolina line. This entire road behind us is in Carolina. I'm not really going to say any of these road names just because where we're going is private property. But where we're heading is not up this way. So this is kind of spooky enough in its own right.
It is.
Where we're heading is right up there. So, as I said, this is the Hatcher Cemetery. I guess it's more formally known as the Hatcher-Clark Cemetery. I actually forgot how many Clarks were up here, but the Hatchers were actually a very well-known plantation family in the Clawville area, a couple hundred years ago, and had a huge plantation just down this road. That's why it's known as the Hatcher area, Hatcher's Chapel, and all the Hatcher families here. And we're actually standing in the Hatcher Slave Cemetery right now. And instead of, whereas many cemeteries at the time just had small stones or just rocks like this one here below me with no names. This one also had no names, unfortunately. There's just this one monument for all the slaves that are here. But the resident we are searching for today in the cemetery is actually a bit more notorious than the rest of the residents here. So, I believe it is the most recent grave here, actually, or the most recent one to die. I don't think there's any more since then. but this is the grave of Fred Hatcher. Died in 1991. Actually lived just down the road from where Dee and I grew up. Naturally, we never met him, but residents in the area said that he was not a very pleasant man. There's many rumors abound of what actually he did. I'll get into those in a little bit, but it is very strange up here that, this cemetery is fairly well kept up. All these graves have grass grown over them, but this one that is near 30 years old, just a little bit of weeds have grown on here, and it almost looks still freshly dug. And now I remember, when we were coming up here, just about 10 years ago, there was nothing had grown on this grave. It was all just still dirt. And there's old wives' tales, superstitions about that, about grass not growing on graves. But again, I'll get more into that here in just a little bit. Now, as I mentioned, Fred Hatcher lived just up the road from the cemetery, less than a mile from where Dee and I grew up. Though he died before either of us were born, his presence was still felt in the community for years afterward. While his house was torn down about 9 or 10 years ago, I was able to find this Google Street View photo of it, just as I remember it, one of the spookiest old houses I've ever known in the area. As for Fred himself, many local legends have spread about the man over the last century. He was married to Martha Earp Hatcher until her death in 1948. Whether true or not, I can't say, but the story goes that Fred accidentally ran over her with his truck 4 or 5 times. Again, I can't verify the truth of these claims, but another story is that he had a son to die as well. Afterward, it's said that Fred laid his body out on the kitchen table, as was somewhat custom when he was younger, the exception being that the custom was to lay the body out for a couple of days, not for a month as it said he did. Locals said you could smell the body for over a mile away. For years, his appearance alone terrorized residents of the area. My mother said he would walk past their house when she was a child. She's always said that he was the most terrifying man she's ever seen. Just a look of sheer wickedness in his demeanor, with a huge goiter on the side of his neck. Dee's father even likened his appearance to that of Freddy Krueger. If any of these stories are true, I'm glad I never had to meet him. As for the cemetery itself, while nothing out of the ordinary happened on this visit, this is one place that I can attest to some strange things happening. Others who have visited at night over the years have reported everything from the ground shaking underneath them to being chased out by some sort of brightly glowing orb about the size of a baseball. While I feel many of these stories are a bit far-fetched, I can personally verify one instance of being chased out, so to say, by some unseen being. A former lady friend and I were exploring the woods behind the cemetery, and both of us clearly heard rather heavy footsteps of what sounded bipedal, crunching through the fallen leaves. While the woods are not that thick, we could still see nothing, though it seemed to be following very close behind us. Even once we decided to turn around, the sound continued until we were halfway back down the hill. While it's still a very interesting cemetery with some very fascinating graves, many dating back to the 19th century, this is definitely a place I'll only visit in the light of day. Alright, so we are back down at the bottom of the hill. Thankfully today, didn't really have any issue. Like Dee was saying earlier, how, years ago you'd go up there, you'd be up there 5 minutes, it'd be calm as it is down here, and the wind just start howling up there. Trees acting like they're going to crack. And, that was a regular thing up there, and that's kind of what stopped me from going up there. And I've said in videos before about my opinion on the paranormal. I'm not really a believer in such, but there are some things that I don't like messing with. I'm not going to attempt certain stuff. But so what do you think, D, of being up there for the first time in quite a while? Well, actually, you've been up there more recently than I have.
Yeah, it was. I'm glad to finally to get back up there, especially still had some daylight left. The last time I was up there, it was really really dark, and we was having to use the flashlights on our cell phones
Yeah,
too.
I ain't doing that mess.
Yeah, so it was. This was a whole lot better, just to capture the atmosphere a little bit better with some daylight left, and getting to see a lot of the old tombstones, and I believe it looks like some of them have been redone here recently.
Yeah, I was noticing that too. I know there's that one that was from
The captain guy.
well, there's that woman that's from the 1850s or whenever.
Oh yeah, when
And
she died. Yes.
yeah, and it looked like a fairly brand new stone, so that had to have been replaced somewhat recently. What's amazing, some of these old stones though, how long, if they were well done, how long they actually hang on. I mean, if they'd done something more than just scratching into a rock, the ones that had enough money to buy a good stone back then, some of those stones will hold up for hundreds of years.
Another thing I might add too is, considering the last time I was in the dark when I come up here, and the previous time we come up here 10 years ago, I didn't realize when we done the first shot when you was standing where the slave monument was, and I didn't realize that was even there.
Really?
I guess I never paid much attention, or like it was grew up last time, but yeah, I never realized.
Yeah,
it was there.
now I do think the last time I was up here, it was a little more grown up through there. But yeah, that's what I actually remember the most about this cemetery, because
That was really new to me.
yeah, it's I knew they were all in the back there with just that one marker. I mean, it's still not a place I want to frequent. I mean, nothing too out of the ordinary happened while we were up there, but I mean, you can see just from the road here. I mean, it's just a creepy looking road, and it's a decent little ways up that hill. It's not too far, but even when I'm coming through here at night, I don't even like looking up that way, just because it's just such a, just like you said earlier, it just has that eerie vibe to it. I hate that word to use a vibe or energy, but yeah, I mean, it really does have just a creepy feeling all around here. But stay tuned for the second half of this video. Be going back to earlier this summer when Raven and I took a trip to another pretty creepy cemetery that's fairly local. That is the final resting place of one Charlie Lawson. Alright, and this is definitely one of the more darker locations that we've ever visited on the road with Vincent. We're at I believe it's called the Browder Family Cemetery. And we're going to take a look at definitely the most infamous grave in Stokes County, North Carolina. And we are in the Browder Family Cemetery right outside Germantown, North Carolina. And behind us is the grave of one Charlie Lawson.
Yeah, and the story with Charlie here is back in 1929 on Christmas Day, he woke up that morning and sent his oldest son to the store to buy shotgun shells. While he was gone, murdered the entire rest of his family, all of his kids and his wife, and then he took his own life.
And they are all buried here together in one grave. The entire family, even the ones that he did not kill on that morning. And as you can see, this is a very old cemetery. I mean, there are many stones dating back to the 19th century here. And it's it almost seems out of place, even though this is a still fairly rural area. But just to think that something like this could happen in such a small town, such a peaceful small town.
What makes it kind of infamous and creepy, infamously creepy really, is that we still don't know why this happened. There's theories as to what could have went wrong, what was going on in his head, but as far as we know, he had no history of mental illness, no criminal record, no violent history at all. Seemingly a normal guy with a normal life. There's theories ranging from incest to possibly even having something to do with the Great Depression. Because that's the time that it happened, but we'll never really know. Not now, but in the coming years, it will be in a better land. We'll read the meaning of our tears, and then sometime we'll understand.
Now, while the rain hindered us from fully exploring the cemetery that day, I returned a couple weeks later to film some of the other graves, and I noticed something that I never had before. There's an overwhelming amount of children's graves in this cemetery. Many, of course, date back to the early 20th century, when the infant and child mortality rate was much higher. But still, this is probably the most I've ever seen in one cemetery. Makes you wonder if something more wasn't going on in the area. Now, in a few minutes I make the remark that I don't know if the cemetery is still in use, but after further exploration, I discovered a handful of recent graves here. Still another very fascinating cemetery. And of course, if you're interested in learning more about the Lawson family, check out the 2007 documentary, A Christmas Family Tragedy. Now, of course, there is the local legend that if you should cover the grave of Charlie Lawson with leaves and twigs and whatnot in the area, that within a few minutes they'll all be blown off the grave. But we can both attest to that being BS.
Yeah, because I did that one time.
Yeah, I think we all have at some point, and anyone in the area who's been here. And if you should visit this place, do be respectful that it is a family cemetery, even if one of its residents are, not really respect-worthy. But the rest of the people here, this is a family cemetery. I don't know if it's still in use, but do show respect when you're at any cemetery, especially on any private property.